Okay, in this video, I'm just going to talk very briefly about how you structure a statistical analysis section and a results section in a scientific lab report. Because that's what the skills that you've been learning in research methods so far, especially quantitative research methods, has all been about. In lab reports, of which you are going to write several across your time at university, including your final year dissertation, which will be a research project, you are going to have to integrate data handling, statistical analysis, and data presentation skills in order to do well in those lab reports. So what I've opened up here is the model answer from week 3. Now, if you remember, in week 3, part A of that task asked you to create a results section and a statistical analysis section for data where you were looking at the difference between vertical jump heights and 20-meter sprint performances with and without arms. So let's look at the statistical analysis section first, okay? And I think the first thing to point out that these sections shouldn't be overly long, okay? You can see that the statistical analysis section is only 3 or 4 sentences and the results section is only 1 sentence. So writing a good results section is not dependent on the length of it, okay? Now with the statistical analysis section, the first thing you have to do is say where you performed the analysis. What software did you use? So all statistical analysis was performed in IBM SPSS, and in this case we're using version 22. And then you literally just walk your reader through the process that you went through in order to decide what particular test to apply, and then which test you actually did apply, and what your threshold was for accepting whether there was a real difference or no difference. So as you can see here, data were checked for distribution using the Shapiro-Wilk test, and then based on that you decided which particular test you were going to apply. So data on the vertical jumps we found was normally distributed, so we could use the parametric test, which was a paired samples t-test, to make the comparisons between vertical jump performance with and without arms. The data on the 20-meter sprint performance was not normally distributed, so we had to make the comparisons using the non-parametric test, which was the Wilcoxon signed rank test. So you just state to the reader that what exactly procedure you followed, and there it is. And then you have to say what your threshold was for accepting whether there was a difference. In all cases, we will accept the threshold of lower than 0.05. So significance was set at p lower than 0.05. And that's your statistical analysis section. If you have more variables, then it will inevitably be a bit longer, but you don't have to make it any longer than it needs to be to explain the process at which you did it. Okay, now move on to the results section. So in the results section, all we do is state the results that we found. We don't try and explain the results, we don't try and introduce why we were examining something, we just state what we found. All the rest of it comes in different sections. So when we try and discuss why we might have found something, that obviously comes in the discussion section. Where we try and say why we were interested in a particular comparison, that comes in the introduction section. In the results, we just state our findings. So what you should be essentially trying to say is what was the comparison that you were making, what was the finding, which direction was the finding, and some kind of indication about the magnitude of the finding. So in this case, I've written vertical jump height was significantly, i.e. there was a real difference, lower. Okay, so vertical jump height was lower, and I've given 12.4%, so it was lower by 12.4%, when participants were not allowed to use their arms compared with when they were. So that tells the reader that vertical jump height performance was impaired by this much when participants were allowed to use their arms compared with when they were. Same for a 20-meter sprint performance. 20-meter sprint performance was significantly slower, so time increased by plus 3%, when participants were not allowed to use their arms compared with when they were. provide the magnitude, provide the lower threshold. So you're saying it's significantly slower, you have to say p was lower than 0.05. So remember, you don't present the actual statistical boxes from SPSS, you just use the p-values and the probabilities that you calculate in SPSS to support the statements that you make. So you're saying here, 20-meter sprint performance was significantly slower, you support that with your statistical analysis, p lower than 0.05. And then finally, you can see here what I've done is, after the statement of the results, I've said figure 1, A and B, respectively. And that just tells the reader that if you want to see the data that I'm talking about here, then you refer to figures 1A and 1B. And then you can see here that the figures are presented below. So figure 1A, vertical jump performance, arms and no arms, and figure 1B, 20-meter sprint performance, arms and no arms. Provide a nice title for the reader so that they know what they're looking for, so that when they're referring down to the figure they can see what's being presented. Tell the reader how the data is presented in a figure, and make sure you denote what the significance value is using the stars, and then give them a little footnote to tell them what that means. Okay, keep it short, keep it succinct, and keep it on topic. And that's this video.